The sound of praise for your Sunday morning.
The only one who could ever teach me.
Introducing Reverend A.R. Bernard of the Christian Cultural Center.
Was the son of a preacher man.
And Rabbi Joseph Potasnik of Religion on the Line.
The only one who could ever teach me.
Now, on Talk Radio 77 WABC, here's the Rev and the Rabbi, where faith matters.
Good morning, I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, before
Last
we go
Sunday,
further,
Rabbi.
Yeah, but before we
Last
go
Sunday.
further, you know you have a lot of New York Yankee fans who are hurting deeply. And as one from Boston, once again, I'm here for you. I am here to bring you comfort and consolation during this very troubling time. But let's keep in mind, it's a game. It's not the election. And even there's a day after. Life continues, right?
Thank you for being the voice of hope this Sunday morning.
Let me ask you this. Years ago, a Jewish leader said to a group of rabbis, I hope you didn't become a rabbi just to fight anti-Semitism. That resonated with me because obviously growing up in a Holocaust survivor home, I heard a lot about anti-Semitism. But I also felt I have a responsibility to promote Jewish pride, Jewish hope. Yes, you got to fight anti-Semitism, but that can't be the sole battle. That can be the sole cause. You have a similar experience?
Well, you know, in the tradition of the Black church, and let's look at that. I mean, you know, many have gone off into areas of mixed congregations, white evangelicalism, etc. But in the tradition of the Black church, Rabbi, the minister was the key voice for the community. The gathering on Sunday was the largest people base to speak into the community. And in the very, very early days, not everyone can read and write. The preacher, usually the pastor, could, you know, but he was the voice of the people within the social context. And they expected to hear him, you know, say something on how they should continue to respond to the realities. You had slavery, you had Jim Crow, you had segregation, then you had the civil rights movement, you know. So it was always more than just a profession. It was a community leader. Now, were there those who decided to specialize in civil rights, in civil activism? Absolutely. That does not speak to the majority now, because the majority are now shepherds. They're trying to help the people walk through the realities of life and, you know, experience it in the context of their faith and allow their faith to make sense of all the stuff that's going on. So that's my short answer.
If I could connect the two, I would say that we also found that being a proud Jew was one of the best responses to anti-Semitism. Because the trouble with only being responded to anti-Semitism is once that's taken away, if it ever is taken away, what do you got left? There's got to be more than just the anti. And Harold Kushner, a great rabbi years ago, said being anti-Semitism doesn't translate into being a positive Jew. So, I mean, to be Jewish.
Careful.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's a careful balance. You know, I teach that Jesus was totally and unapologetically identified with his Jewishness. It was very clear in our New Testament, you know, the practice of tradition, his association and identity with it. He understood that his mission took him beyond his own people, but he unashamedly, you know, identified with his Jewishness. And we should not shy away from identifying with those things that, you know, distinguish us. But I think when we become ethnocentric and, you know, become extreme, that becomes a problem.
Yeah, well said. All right, we have a guest who's well known, well respected, and I'm talking about Congressman Peter King. So we have much to look forward to, and I'm sure a very insightful, interesting, and intelligent conversation.
Sounds good to me. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of the Rev and the Rabbi Sunday morning here on 77 WABC.
where faith matters. The Rev and the Rabbi. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Tasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, we don't just have a congressman from Long Island. We have America's congressman. And, you know, years ago when Ed Koch was ABC, he was hailed as the voice of reason. And I think many people look to Congressman Peter King today as the voice of reason. So with that, we go to Congressman Peter King. Good morning. Welcome to Rev and
Good morning,
Rabbi.
Rabbi. Good morning, Reverend. Great to be with the two of you, really.
When's the last time you were called the voice of reason? Just now.
Certainly, I tell you, my wife still can't believe it. She always thought I was a wacko, but that's the advantage of getting into politics in New York, especially in this era. You can, just by acting halfway normal, people think you're the voice of reason. So, anyway, here I am. You got me.
So,
Congressman, in all the years, I'm sorry, Rabbi, just jumping in all the years that you've been in political office, have you ever seen an election like this, a presidential election like this?
No, I said that in 2016. I said it in 2020. I'm saying it again. Each one becomes more extreme. Each one becomes more, not just hard-hitting. There's nothing wrong with a hard-hitting campaign, but extremely personal, where there was absolutely no connection between either side. I mean, I don't think the Nixon people died in 1960 when Kennedy was elected. And even Al Gore, to give him credit, in 2000 when he lost on a 5-4 decision in the Supreme Court, the country came together. And that was a pretty bitter campaign. The country came together. I just think what we're at now is a new stage in American politics. There could be any number of reasons. It could be social media. It could be that the congressional districts are reapportioned in such a partisan way. It could be cable TV. We can go through a million different reasons, but the fact is it's at a stage now where we've gone from Ronald Reagan, who was probably the most conservative president we ever had at that time, Tip O'Neill, a down-the-line liberal Democrat as the Speaker of the House, and yet they could work together, and sometimes they agreed, sometimes they didn't, but they got things done, and people on both sides admired them for what they were trying to do. Today, if you try to cooperate with the other side, you're a traitor. I mean, I've seen it as a Republican when I work with Democrats, or even say something good about a Democrat. I get attacked, my social media, thousands, hundreds of people attacking me. On the other hand, if Democrats work with us, I've had Democrats tell me, not to put a picture on Facebook with them, and not to tell them about the meeting we had, because their base will attack them. I mean, it's just so it used to be looked upon as an asset. Cooperation, bipartisanship is now looked upon as making you the enemy.
So let me ask you, Congressman, given that dynamic, the day after the election, we're a divided nation. How do we begin to repair, or is that something that is a naive question?
I hope it's not naive. There's two things. One, if the election result is clear cut, I think that could be a help. On the other hand, if either one loses, that does lose, is willing to come forward the next day and say, I fought it hard, I feel very badly about losing, but the fact is we are a democracy, we're going forward, and let's try to find some common ground. It would help especially if the winning candidate could find some issue that was really contentious during the campaign and announce immediately, we're going to work together on this issue, and we are going to work it out. We'll try to work it out even before the inauguration. That would be a sign of support. I just don't know if it can be done. I wish it could be done. Again, we saw it in many races. To me, Al Gore, and I'm not a big Al Gore fan per se, but I remember when he lost in 2000, after that, I mean, really rough campaign. And then 6 weeks after the election, going from court to court, state court, federal court, U.S. Court of Appeals, and then finally the Supreme Court. And he lost 5-4. Within 10 minutes, he's on the air saying it's time for me to go. I mean, that was classy. Or John Kerry in 2004. I mean, he had, I don't think he would have won, but he had a legitimate issue because Ohio was a swing state, and there were long lines of African-American voters outside certain polling places when the polls closed. At least that was the allegation. That could have sustained a court fight for 2 or 3 weeks. The next day, John Kerry said, it's over. I concede. Nixon with Kennedy. Nixon conceded. So that's we should somehow realize that the election is bigger than either person or either party. It's about coming together of a democratic people in a democracy on one day or now a series of days leading up to Election Day. And whatever that result is, whether you like it or not, you have to find a way to accept it.
Yeah, yeah, well said, Congressman. I think about the fact that we won't necessarily know on election night who the winner is. It may take a few days before we can determine a winner. Isn't that true? Isn't that possible?
Yeah, it is. And I'm not a big fan of early voting anyway. I know it's out there, and I coach people not to do it because it's there. To me, to be voting, like in some states, they start October 4th. That's like voting for the league MVP at the All-Star game. I mean, in the middle of the season, or deciding who the World Series champion is in June or July. That campaign to me is like a full-length novel or like a full-length story, and you have to you shouldn't be voting before you know what the end result is. Having said that, reality is people are doing early voting. It's out there. Here in Long Island, it used to be early voting. It started a few years ago. You walk in, you do early voting. Now you wait online for 2 hours. The lines are a mile long here in Nassau County. So and apparently that's what's going on all around the country. So you're right, though. Many states are not going to start counting those votes till after election night. And so that can drag it out for several weeks, especially if it's a close race in those states. So, no, that could add to it. So there's a lot of roadblocks ahead, that's for sure. Minefields, I should say.
But isn't that also demonstrate on the other side a real desire to vote, to go out there, not apathy, as has happened in many elections? Yeah,
it is. That is a good sign. That is the upside of that. I don't know if the vote is as informed when you vote a month ahead of time, but having said that, no, it does get people involved. That's good. And maybe then they will feel that, whatever the result is on election night, they're more willing to accept it. They were part of the process, and now they see how it plays out. The other side would be if they say, all that effort, everybody I spoke to was for Trump. Everyone I spoke to was for Harris. How could they have lost? And that's the other thing. We live in our own echo chambers these days.
Yeah, no, that's true. Even as I don't know, how Rabbi is going to, how he's addressing this, but today is the last Sunday before the election. So my congregation is expecting me to say something about the election process and what we're facing. And unfortunately, you may ask the question, well, who are you voting for? But that's not the real question. The real question in this climate is, who are you voting for means whose side are you on? And that's a problem, that we've reduced it to political affiliation, political identity, to determine who's for us and who's against us.
Let me go.
It used to be a conversation about, well, who are you voting for? Okay, why are you voting for him? And it was more external. Now it's internal. It's like you're choosing sides, and you're either on my side or you're the enemy.
Let me go a step further with that. I know clergy who have kind of shown their hand, or congregants have read into who they're voting for, and they've dropped out of the congregation.
What?
Yeah. So in other words, if they feel, or look, there are some clergy who are clear. I don't know why, but they're clear about who they're voting for. And to me, that's a big mistake. I don't think our people, well, at least in the past, they weren't looking for us to support a particular candidate. Maybe that's changed a bit over the years. But I know of cases, Christian and Jewish.
Oh, yeah.
Where people have said, I am walking away from this congregation because my clergy person said the following, supporting in some way this candidate. That's how bad it is. Not to mention families that don't talk to each other.
Yeah, I never heard of families not talking to each other before, and that's almost common. I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of this, but look at the Kennedy family. I mean, RFK Jr. has basically been expelled from his family, and who would have thought that was going to be happening? And there's been so many cases around where so many instances we have people, that's my sister, I'm not talking to her. It's my brother, I'm not talking to him, and that's my nephew, he's giving me a hard time. I mean, there's no really respect for somebody else's views, which is dangerous. Listen, I have nothing against having firm opinions, strongly held opinions. Be willing to listen to the other side and be willing to give them credit for, honest judgment. If there's some reason personally you don't like the person, it's one thing. But to say that because they're voting for Trump or voting for Harris, you're never going to speak with them, to me, it's a dangerous path to get down.
I will tell you, I've had conversations with people on the ground, and they are fatigued. They are exhausted by the political climate. It's like they want it to be done and over with so we can deal with the next level of problems. But there is this voter fatigue. We're just exhausted by this process and what we've experienced over the last few years. Rabbi?
I'm exhausted just hearing about it every day, every moment. Let me just tell you something that happened in Israel. Captain Avi Goldberg was killed in battle in Lebanon. And, we have what's called Shiva, the visitation. You pay your condolences. And the family posted a notice where they had an interesting qualification. It said, to all of the politicians who will be coming to our home for Shiva, please come in pairs. Bring someone with you who has a different point of view. Show that you can walk together with someone who's on a different side. That's quite a statement to make during a Shiva, but it's a lesson. If we want young people to learn how to live with one another, they got to live with difference.
Yeah, and that to me is the essence of a democratic society and a civilized society is respect the other person's views. And that's, again, going back to Reagan and O'Neill, because I've heard that actually Tip O'Neill was not that big a fan, even personally, of Ronald Reagan, but he felt his duty as Speaker was to work with the President of the United States. And I'm sure Reagan probably liked O'Neill more than O'Neill liked him personally, but both of them realized that the personal feelings didn't matter as much as the fact they had a responsibility as the two leading elected officials in the country to find a way to work together and let the American people know they were working together. And when they didn't, still go out and have a drink together, which is, and I know Rabbi's going to say that's what the Irish always do. That was just an excuse.
No.
No stereotypes. Okay.
You think trash talking helps campaigns? Because there's a lot of trash talking that's going on.
No, all that does is it firms up your very narrow base, but it doesn't sway one undecided voter, one independent voter, or one voter who may be thinking of going the other way. Now, that has, to me, trash talking doesn't work, and it demeans the whole process. Listen, when you go back and look at some of the jokes that Reagan told or Kennedy told about Nixon, they were so, easygoing. I mean, there was humor. They could cut a bit. The fact is they were basically fun stories, and you were finding a way to get your point across, take a little bit of shot at the other guy, but do it in a humorous way. But you don't go for the kill. You go, and today it gets vile, it gets personally insulting, and it just turns people off. And anyone who is thinking of voting for your candidate, once they hear that, I'm heck with him. I'd never vote with those guys.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I have a question for you. 74% of the religious population in the country identifies as Democrats. But the Republican statement is, well, they're the party of God, and the Democrats are the anti-God party. How do you respond to something like that, Congressman?
Yeah, I haven't seen those numbers, but I'll accept the fact that they're accurate. I would say a lot of those people who registered Democrats could be like more like old time Democrats, like Irish Catholic Democrats, who are actually more conservative. So they register as Democrats, but they are more inclined to vote Republican or vote conservative. Also, and I know it always gets dangerous on the Christian side if I start analyzing things, but I know that, for instance, many Hispanics are certainly Catholics, like probably the overwhelming majority of Hispanics are Catholics. And yet, I think more and more of them are now starting to vote Republican. So it's hard to say. Then you have, the Christian right, born again Christians, which I'm not part of. I respect them. So I'm not that familiar with them. But they are in fairly large numbers, and that's really all I can say on that. I do know though that just from my experience dealing, the Catholic community, that many of those, especially the old time Irish and Italian Catholics who register as Democrats, are more and more voting Republican.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing because, even in the community of color, in the Black community, right? Although They have historically voted Democrat, lean Democrat. Many, large, significant number, let me put it that way, of African Americans are social conservatives. They're very, into moral order and structure and all of that. But, the Democratic side of things have pushed the civil rights agenda down the road, in their minds, more so than the Republican Party. And many of the African Americans are in a dilemma when it comes to elections like this, where they have their context and personal concerns, and both parties offer something that resonates with them, but then they have to choose. You don't have that in the Jewish community, do you, Rabbi?
No, of course we do. We have unanimity all the time.
We'll be back with Peter King.
Reverend A.R. Bernard, Rabbi Joseph Potasnik, the Rev and the Rabbi. Talk Radio 77 WABC and the all-new WABCRadio.com.
Welcome back with Congressman Peter King. One of the primary concerns of Jews is Israel, support for Israel. And there is an argument to be made that President Trump has been very, very supportive of Israel, given, the Golan Heights, given Jerusalem being recognized as a capital, given the Abraham Accords. So I think you're going to see a higher percentage of Jewish votes on that side than normally you would find, because historically Jews are very, in the Democratic side. Congressman King, you were amazing that way, that you were in some very Republican districts, and you got a significant Jewish vote. But that was an anomaly.
Well, that's because I used to be on your radio show. I saw you hid behind Rabbi Potasnik.
No, but I mean where Israel is, in that equation, when you vote, can have a major, major impact on who you vote for. Congressman?
Yeah, and I would say also, again, I certainly can't, be an expert on the African American community or the Jewish community. But Reverend, what you were saying about the civil rights movement. Generally, people say, "What have you done for me lately?" And that was 20, 30 years ago. The main movements in civil rights. Obviously, there's still issues, but the main historical decisions are made, let's say, decades ago. Now they see issues that may affect them, whether it's crime, whether it's even the immigration issue affects people differently, and you see that also in the Hispanic community. I know the Irish Catholics always felt indebted to FDR, but now that's all in the past, and they see the fact that the neighborhoods, the crime is increasing, the cops are being held back. They see that sort of almost like a lack of patriotism by some of the spokesmen for the Democratic Party. They see the demonstrations in the streets for Hamas, and it turns them away.
Yeah. What do you see with the Jewish vote, Congressman?
What's that now?
What do you see with the Jewish vote?
I leave that up to you. And all kidding aside, let me give you an example. Here in Nassau County, in Anthony D'Esposito's district, which is a large part of that was my district for 20 of my 28 years. In that district, it used to be the Five Towns area, was very, very liberal, reformed Jewish community. Basically, I hate to say it, we didn't go in there unless we had strong ties in individual temples. Now it's almost entirely Orthodox, and he expects to get, and Democrats will probably concede this, 85 to 90% of the Democratic vote in the Five Towns. That's the Orthodox Jewish community. Conservative Jews are voting more Republican than they did before. So the Jewish vote is now on Long Island, certainly in Nassau County, and what I can tell in Suffolk, it's going more and more Republican, largely, I think, because of the influx of Orthodox Jews in the Five Towns area, and then in the Great Neck area, which used to be radically left. Now you have large numbers of Persian, Iranian Jews who really become very significant up there. So it's all of the old cliches about which way people are going to vote, they're changing, significantly.
I think the Israel factor is major there.
Oh, it certainly is. Certainly
Yeah.
is in the Orthodox community, and among others, certainly some. Again, I'm speaking as an outsider, but certainly among some in the Reformed Jewish community, and more than that, in the conservative community. No, the Jewish vote is no longer. Maybe it never was, but it was looked upon as a monolith. That's no longer the case.
Right.
And when I say as a monolith, Democrats looked upon it as a monolith, the same as Republicans did. Democrats felt they had a vote they couldn't lose. Republicans felt that's a vote it's almost impossible to get.
Well,
Congressman, I'd like to know how you respond to this, because some of my clergy colleagues are telling their congregants, look, vote your conscience, vote your values. But when you really peel it back, people tend to have a set of values. Yeah, they have a moral guiding system and a set of principles, but they tend to vote in the direction of their concerns, their immediate concerns, as opposed to their underlying values. Do you find that to be true?
Yeah, it's true. It's how a person votes. There's so many factors that come into it. Some people they do it largely on what their values are. Others on what the pocketbook says. Others about survival.
Right.
If they're in a community that's been ravaged by crime, that's going to be the main issue. If you have others who just see a decline in civility and a decline in where the country's going, not in a strict moral sense, but just an overall sense of decency, they may vote with the party that they feel more speaks for them. But and also on an emotional level, I would say that the riots, the demonstrations, which more and more were pro-Hamas and anti-Semitic, that has caused, I felt, just from Jewish friends I have and from different events I go to, a real concern among people in the Jewish community about whether or not there is an anti-Semitism, which is being not just developing, but almost being tolerated. And so, like what happened at Columbia University and other schools, and so much of academia, they feel the Democrats are more willing to accept that. Not that they are in any way anti-Semitic, but they feel that that's a base of their party that they don't want to lose. I mean, the whole idea, like, for instance, in Michigan, where there's a strong Arab community, feels very strongly against Israel. And so Democrats need to be willing to tolerate more anti-Israeli, borderline anti-Semitic comments coming from those Arab communities. So it's a whole new, I shouldn't say ball game, not trivialize it. It's a whole new challenge, and so many different of the monoliths are crumbling.
It's a sad commentary when groups are ready to somehow sanitize or minimize the hatred, the anti-Semitism. When you're holding up a sign and saying, we are with Hamas, and that's a terrorist organization, when you're holding up a sign that says globalize the Intifada, which is about killing Jews, how on earth do you support that or close your eyes to it? I mean, is it strictly a political calculation?
I would think it has to be, especially even see among some Jewish politicians who seem to look the other way on that. Yeah, listen, you could argue. I mean, I've sided with Israel. Right? Listen, the last 10 years, I had only about 2% Jews in my district, so there was nothing in it for me politically. But as a selfish American, I want Israel as an ally in the Middle East against Iran and against Hamas and against ISIS and against all those other insurgent groups, terrorist groups. But to me, no matter how I would feel on an issue, there's no room at the table for Hamas. There's no room at the table for Hezbollah. Right. Just like, I am making the equation. If we're having a debate over civil rights, there's no room at the table for the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah. Rabbi, let me ask you, and Congressman, of course you can weigh in on this. Is there a threshold for the Jewish community when it comes to voting? Do we say, look, we want to know immediately, how do you feel about this and how do you feel about that? And once you pass that, then we can talk about the other issues. Is there a threshold?
It's like many answers that were the same when I take an exam on the Talmud. It depends. You ask for, you want a definite answer. Well, it depends. It depends what your priorities are. I mean, for a number of people, it's going to be Israel. That's going. It's going to be college campuses. For others, it's going to be, let's say the abortion issue, women's issues, whatever it is. It depends what's on that ladder. What your concerns are. You say you vote your concerns. That to me is going to determine where people go, and I don't know. I don't know where our people, my people, are going to go on this. I think you're going to see some surprising numbers, but there is no definite answer as to what the threshold, what weighs on people. On some it's this, on others it's that.
Rabbi, you think it varies with age, like younger Jews as concerned with Israel as older Jews? As the Reverend was saying, younger African Americans as concerned about who passed the Civil Rights Bill 40 years ago as they are about what's happening in their neighborhood right now.
Yeah.
It's a difference. You go ahead, Rabbi.
No, there is. I mean, you find that many of the older people, Israel is way up there. Unfortunately, with some of the younger people, it doesn't have that emotional hold. We often have that phrase, it's not in the kishkas. It's not in the, in the innards. It's not inside of them. They don't feel the same. They're not as passionate about it as we were. So that, there is an age differentiation.
And economics plays a role, Rabbi, because, you had a generation of African Americans who've experienced unprecedented wealth, education, and upward mobility, even though, there's still a need to fight for inequities in certain areas, systems, structures, policies, and practices. But for the most part, they've experienced unprecedented wealth, upward mobility, and education. So their economic status has changed. And that affects voting because now all of a sudden you're thinking differently than when you were economically marginalized. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but look at
and you're thinking about taxes. You're thinking about all these things that you didn't think about before because you didn't have anything.
Look at the Jewish experience. For us, I think for all groups, education was the ladder that was going to get you there. And if you wanted to succeed, our parents hammered into us, you better go to school. So what happens? We emphasized education, college education. And what colleges? The so-called elite schools. We pushed our kids, you apply there, you apply to Columbia, you apply to Harvard, all these other schools. And then they got there. And look at how they were greeted. So there's a whole rethinking. Congressman, I was telling the Cardinal, I wonder how you feel about it. If some of the Catholic schools, Catholic University, Notre Dame, would open up Jewish departments and would say, we're open for Jews in a very positive way. I was talking to someone from BYU. They now have a Jewish quarterback, Congressman. I know that shocks you, but they have a Jewish quarterback who's led them to an undefeated record. If you show that we don't have hostility on campus, you're going to be welcome here as a Jew. You don't have to hide any Jewish symbols. I think you're going to have a significant increase in Jewish population.
I think it would be on that. And by the way, without trying to trivialize this, you mentioned the Jewish quarterback at BYU. I still haven't recovered from the fact that in 1993, Boston College, a Jesuit college, they caused Notre Dame to lose the national championship because some left-footed Jewish kicker playing for a Catholic school, Boston College, kicked a field goal against Notre Dame in the final second of the game. So that's something I still haven't gotten over. So the Jewish quarterback at BYU is that that's surprising to me. No, listen, I think schools should. I would think that, especially schools which claim to have a moral commitment like Notre Dame, Georgetown, Boston College, Fordham, I think they would be not just right economically and educationally, but it would send a great message if they did open up a special section on Jewish studies, a Department of Jewish Studies, for any number of reasons, historic reasons, but also right now when we look back at these things. How did this happen in the 30s? How did this happen in the 40s? How could blacks be treated like this in the 1950s? How could Jews be persecuted? And, maybe we're living through that now and don't realize it. And don't open our eyes to see it. People say, why didn't more clergy speak out against the Hamas demonstrations? Why didn't more Catholics go out and actively recruit Jewish Jewish students and Jewish professors to come to their school as a sanctuary once they're facing in other academic circles?
And it's interesting because there's a lot of pressure now, especially with social media platforms. There's a lot of pressure to show allegiance publicly to a political party, social media, protests, etc. And then when you do that, you are attacked. You're criticized. You're alienated. You're socially excluded. So people are afraid to even say who they're going to vote for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's why it's in the last two presidential elections. Apparently, there was the silent Trump voter. I mean, he won in 2016 and lost in 20, but in both cases, he outperformed what his polling showed. And I don't know if that's still true. Maybe it's the Harris voters are afraid to say it now. Again, things are changing so much. But no, it is. Listen, there are people I know in jobs on both sides, by the way, who cannot speak out in their profession as to who they're for, because they could lose clients. Their bosses may turn against them. I mean, again, I've even had family members who have had to shy away from speaking out on certain issues because of the pressure they would feel from where they work.
You don't have that here at WABC, by the way, the silent WABC voter. I think I can reasonably predict where people are going. Congressman Peter King, Rev. By the way, Ava, the statement that Congressman made about how he agrees with Senator Schumer, maybe you ought to take that out just for his. I'm not sure that's gonna sit well there with some people.
I got your back on that one, Congressman.
Okay, very good.
I got your back. Okay, we do what we need to do. I love the honesty and balance that you have demonstrated throughout the years. You're partisan when you feel you need to be partisan. You don't apologize for it, but for most of the time, you're trying to build bridges and find common ground, and I really respect that and appreciate that about you.
And he doesn't compromise his values. This is a man who remains steadfast in his values, and that is something that is so admirable. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the great job that you guys do day in and day out, year in and year out, and I really appreciate being able to say that both of you are friends of mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you, my friend. All right. And stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on 77 WABC. We'll be right back.
Reverend A.R. Bernard, Rabbi Joseph Potasnik, the Rev and the Rabbi. Talk Radio 77 WABC and the all-new WABCRadio.com.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard. Great interview.
I walk away feeling so upbeat, having a reasonable, respectful conversation with Congressman King. And we can disagree on certain issues and have over the years, but there is room for both of us to talk to each other and here to look at an election. And we walk away. We were friends before. We're friends after. I mean, he's a very close friend. I valued him for years. Bill Clinton is a close friend of his, and he'll tell you that.
Yeah. Yep. And that's a sign of maturity, Rabbi, when we can sit down, disagree with each other, and then go out and have dinner together, at our favorite restaurant. We need to see a restoration of civility, dignity, honor, and respect. Integrity. We need to see that restored. That's my prayer for the American system and our representatives, Rabbi. I don't know if it's high and lofty, but
that's what we're about.
I think it's necessary.
That's what we're about. The people who look at the prophets looked at them and saying, wait a minute, they were iconoclasts. They went against the status quo, but they were aspirational. They also look forward to, a better time. And I think we have to continue on that path. Otherwise, we're doomed.
And that's, of course, that's what we bring to the table as like they say, men of the cloth, individuals who represent, moral standards. Our ability to elevate the conversation, to transcend our cultural biases, beyond political and sociological ideologies. We have to be able to elevate the conversation in order to think clearly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we become a part of the echo chamber.
But what bothers me is that there are those who think that attacking the other in a merciless fashion, demonizing, devaluing the other human being is the right approach. That you gain traction, you win votes by going in that direction. And I heard what the congressman said. Yeah, you energize a certain base, but certainly those who are thinking which way to go.
Yeah, it's true. One thing that we didn't ask him, and I thought about it after the break, but just the distrust in institutions and leaders. Where we are today, many people have lost trust in political institutions and political candidates, and they feel like the system itself is flawed or corrupt. And, the mistrust shifts the focus from the individual candidate to broader ideological battles. And that's what we're seeing playing out right before our eyes. What say you?
I would hope that the day after the election, that people take a deep breath, step back, and look at what we do have instead of what we don't have in their eyes. We have a country where you can vote for different candidates. You don't have that in Iran. We have a country where you have a voice in addition to your vote. You don't have that in Iran. Look around the world and say, my God, look at the blessings of being here and participating, in that civic arena. You don't have that in the, other places in this world. I think we need to focus on all we have, not, whether we lost the election.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We can easily forget the value of what we have when we're focused on what we don't have or what we think we should have. I was at a conference with a gathering of intergenerational gathering of ministers, and helping them to think through from a biblical perspective, the issues that are in front of us.
Right.
And what I tried to explain is, we can get caught up in the abortion issue, the LGBTQ issue, all of these other things. But really, what we're talking about is a clash of visions.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about two different visions of America and how we should be structured, how things should run. And when you begin to elevate it there and say, well, wait a minute, we can come out of the emotional realm of the specific issues that we may be emotionally attached to and say, well, let's talk about our vision for this country. What should it look like? How should it be organized? How should we live in it? And it changes the conversation.
Yeah. Look,
I don't think we're there.
We come to the end of the program, and I just want to add, just keep in mind that every Saturday and Sunday in synagogues and churches, we pray for peace for the country. We don't pray for peace for one party. We pray for peace for all of the people. And we pray for the president of all of the people. And I just hope people take those words seriously and stop seeing the other as the enemy.
Yeah. Well said. Good way to end the program. Look, we encourage our audience, our listeners, get out and vote. As a person of color, that is very, very important because a lot of people died for the right to vote. It is a responsibility that we should exercise, regardless of who you vote for. You must exercise the power of your vote. Your vote is your voice.
Right.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Rev and Rabbi. And we will pray for peace as we go through this election day approaching us.
We'll both pray a little bit harder also. Yeah.
I think we better.
Yeah.
Until next time, the Rev and the Rabbi Show right here on 77 WABC. God bless.